Modern philosophy would come to be divided into two different streams. Tonight we're going to focus on the first stream, which is the rationalist system, we say, of the continent, meaning of Europe, of the French and the Germans on the continent. And then the second stream is going to be off on the Isles, the British Isles. Over in England, we're going to develop empiricism, which will be the focus of our next class. So tonight, we're going to focus on the continent with the French and the Germans, and the Dutch. And then next class, when we come back, we'll focus on what's happening in England with the empiricists. The rationalists, then, what makes a rationalist a rationalist? Rationalists rely on reason. And so we're just going to think about, we're going to reason through these things together. We're going to think through these issues and see what we can agree on. We're not going to have recourse to mysticism or private revelation. Remember the person who goes home tonight and the Blessed Virgin Mary speaks to him or her? Happy that you're having that vision, if indeed it's genuine. But we can't rely on that. We have to be thinking about reason. Okay? We're not going to rely on mysticism or feelings. I'm sorry that something makes you feel happy or sad. No, let's leave the feelings aside. Let's just use our minds and think through some things together. What is our model in all of this? Mathematics. Encourage your children and your grandchildren to study math. I'll tell you why. Because in math, there are certain things that are certain. Like the fact that 3 plus 2 will always be 5. 3 plus 2 will never be 4. Have you thought about that before? In math, there are certain things that are always certain. A square will always have, how many sides? 4. And those 4 sides will always be equal. This is fascinating.
A straight line never ends. Right?
In math, there are certain rules, certain principles that will always be true. Whoa. Maybe this provides a model for us about how it is that we should start thinking as human beings. There are certain things, if there are certain things in math that are always true, then are there certain things in this world that are always true as well? And if so, what are those things? We're going to think through some of those things tonight with the rationalists. Has nothing to do with feeling. Whether you're happy or sad, a square will always have 4 sides that are the same length. Follow me? Let's think about those things that are always certain. So personal elements like feelings and sense experience are eliminated. Feelings, don't care how you feel. Let's think through these things. Sense experience, think about that for a moment. Maybe our senses are deceiving us. What we see or what we hear, what we taste, touch, feel, those things could deceive us. Sometimes things happen and we think we hear something. We have that memory of it. And we find out later that that's really not what happened. Follow me? Our senses can deceive us. That's going to present a tricky one. How do I even know that I'm in this classroom with you? How do you know that you're in this classroom with us? How do you know that you're not dreaming this right now? Remember that dream that you had last night? It was really vivid. How do you know that this is not one of those dreams? Your senses could be deceiving you, say the rationalists. We'll get back to that in a moment, and we'll come to figure out whether this is really real, what we're doing here this evening. Descartes is going to help us to figure out whether we're really real here. And so we're going to eliminate all those personal elements, and instead we're going to come up with a body of propositions assured by truth that we can start building upon. If we're going to build a foundation, we're going to make sure that the foundation is solid. So what solid foundation can we start building on? Things that we can all agree on in this very room. Descartes is going to be the first one to get rid of all that authority and tradition of the past. Instead of reading Thomas Aquinas and the Scholastic, get rid of everything from the past. Let's start with, what can we build our house on? What's the solid foundation that we can all agree on? And so as part of this, we're going to see the revival of skepticism. What does it mean to be skeptical? It simply means that you doubt everything. Even the fact that we are here in class together. As much as I love you all, I'm doubting that this is really real. That somehow you could all be figments of my imagination. I could be deceived somehow. I could still be dreaming right now. We're going to doubt everything. That's rationalism. And then the other school that we'll come back to next class then is empiricism. And empiricists, how they're different from rationalists is that rationalists say, no, nothing about feelings, nothing about your own experience. Let's talk about that solid foundation. Empiricists say, wait a minute, experience is important because it's all that I have. All that I have is my experience. You have your experience. Every one of us in this room has our own experiences. Let's think about those experiences. Do we see the difference between the rationalists, using reason, and the empiricists, using experience? They're starting from two different places. So empiricists say then that all of our ideas come from experience, essentially from our sense perception. Everything that you know has come to you from outside through your senses. From things that you've heard, seen, tasted, touched, felt. Everything that you know has come to you from the outside world through your senses. And through introspection. Okay, now that you've brought all of these things into your mind, all of these experiences, all this data, the things that you've tasted and touched and heard and felt, okay, now what do you do with that inside your mind? Those are the empiricists. We take in this data and then we think through what all that means in our mind. The father of British empiricism is John Locke. We're going to come back to John Locke next class, and tonight focus instead on the continent. But just so that we know, he attacked the idea of innate ideas. What is an innate idea? That you were born knowing something. This is my question. How many ideas were in your mind when you were born? John Locke said 0. You mean you had no idea of God when you were born? No. You had no ideas. When you came into this world, you had no ideas. Rousseau referred to it as the tabula rasa, right? You were a blank slate. Tabula rasa, you were a blank slate at birth, and everything that's come to you since then has come to you from outside through your senses. Think about that for a moment. Everything that you know, or think you know, has come to you from outside of you. You weren't born with any ideas. Newton, we've all heard of Isaac Newton, since we're talking about scientists. We talked about Kepler, and we talked about Galileo. Now during this period, Galileo is going to be condemned. Another science in Britain is going to arise, and everything is going to be based on observation. We've heard the famous story of an apple falling on him, right? Discovering gravity. What was that from? How did he come to that conclusion? Did he come up with that through his mind? Was it something he reasoned to? No, it was something that he experienced. According to the story, apple falls on his head, or whatever happened in that instance, and he said to himself, oh, wait a minute, did you ever notice that everything falls down? No matter what it is that you pick up, it will fall down. Every single thing. He got that through his sense experience. Something that he observed. The empiricists of England. So we're going to have two different streams of thought then. In England, the empiricists, what it is that we see and experience. In France, okay, close your eyes. It's cut off the sense experience because you could be deceived. That apple could be part of the same dream that you're having right now. Let's just think about what is certain. We pause there for questions, comments. How crazy is this getting so far?
The continent is who again? What is?
So the continent is going to be the European continent. So that would be all of the countries on the continent. Essentially, there's going to be one philosophy on the continent, which would be Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Holland, Germany, all of those countries, France, all of those countries are going to be on the continent. Rationalists. And then across the channel, on the islands, the British Isles, in England, we're going to see a whole different philosophy arising. Interesting. Two concurrent schools of thought, essentially both of them saying, you know, all this scholasticism of the past, time to get beyond that. Let's start something new. In England, the answer was empiricism, our senses. On the continent, rationalists, the use of reason. Joe, and then Ms.
I don't want to, I like Thomas Aquinas, okay? But he was in error in a number of ways. But we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater because, like scholastic logic, our law systems are actually based. If I find something that's false in this system, then the whole thing falls apart. So I'm concerned that, okay, we forget him, he wasn't good. Up to almost 1900, he was absolutely ruling the church, but he was in there. I got a F in a logic class fighting with a Dominican.
That's right.
Dominicans were bad.
That's right.
But
because you were wrong. Aquinas was
that's right. And all I said is, you know, look outside, things are changing. And the guys almost start foaming at the mouth.
So how interesting, what's going to happen is, in the Roman Catholic Church, what we're going to see here in a moment is that the Roman Catholic Church started to condemn the free thinkers who were not scholastics. And so if you start writing a book that doesn't go back to these authorities of the church, then you could be in error and we could condemn your books. And what happened to Galileo could happen to you if you brought it before the Inquisition. Do you want to risk that, Joe, really? Better to keep your mouth shut. Which is essentially what we had to do in the seminary for all those centuries, because St. Thomas Aquinas is the authority, and you could not say anything wrong about St. Thomas Aquinas. Karl Rahner studied Aquinas and said, we love Aquinas, but it's time to move beyond Aquinas. Time for a new discovery, which is what modern philosophy is all about. Doubt everything, even Aquinas. How fascinating. The story is told that at the end of his life, he even doubted himself. According to that story, he said, everything that I've written is like straw. Like straw. You don't place a lot of value in straw. If offered a piece of gold or a pile of straw, which would you take? Most people would choose the gold. He didn't say my writing is like gold. He said my writing is like straw. Something that you'd use in the stable to cover the stable barn for your animals to be on top of. Fascinating. Vincent and then Matt.
Well, I just had a question. I mean, all this, when did this all really happen? Was it just because, I mean, I know you said we'll leave philosophy and leave religion alone a little bit, but is it because people were falling out of religion? Or was it because now there was more press involved, where people were writing and everything and not believing actually what they read in, let's say, the Bible? If that actually did happen, and when did this modern philosophy start going? And when and why did it start affecting everybody?
That is a fascinating question. So one question that arose is the question of authority. Who has the truth in here? Does Father Jamie have the truth? Because as a church for many years, that's what we said. The Pope and the bishops and the priests, we have the truth, and maybe a little bit will trickle down to you if you're farther down in the pyramid. Maybe. We have the truth. Time of the Reformation, what happened? There were people like Martin Luther saying, wait a minute, should I believe Father Jamie or should I believe the Bible? And what conclusion did he come to? The Bible. Which is why the whole humanist movement was going back to the sources, to the Bible and other sources, because those should be the authority. Were people leaving the church, though? I wouldn't say that people were leaving the church so much as people were simply seeing what it was that religion was doing to this world. After all those wars that we got into over religion, is this really rational, people? Does this make sense to anyone? Matt?
I just, just because of my own bias, the looking at things from philosophy versus psychology perspective, it's not in the 1920s where we actually understood that people have individual cognition, where we have independent thought, and that wasn't just really behavioral response. And so I think we're moving in that direction. And then in the modern world, we still, diagnostically, we want to quantify functional limitations, so we've almost moved back to the science of behavior.
So how fascinating. We're going to unpack some of what Matt has just said with these philosophers. They're going to be struggling with who are we as human beings?
skin.
Are we simply animals that are somehow programmed to behave as we're behaving? Or is there some element of freedom in what we do? These philosophers are going to start wrestling with these questions. Mario?
I would just say, B.F. Skinner, you give me a child, I can train him by behavior. He's not born like that. He was always saying that behaviorism is the way to educate.
Sure.
So interesting, it's almost like behavior, in the same way that we program computers to do certain things. Think about it for a moment, if you've had children, or if you were ever a child yourself, you were programmed to think certain things.
So when your child ends up in jail, he says, I did everything right, but they still,
Take away the reward, you reward, take away the reward.
Interesting, you're programmed in certain ways. A lot of that based on rewards and punishments. You learn to do certain things because you find out, okay, some things have certain good consequences and you're rewarded. Certain things have certain negative consequences and you're punished for those things. Wait a minute, you start learning, you're becoming programmed by those people to act in certain ways.
I can't even get my dogs to behave with that.
Excuse me?
And my dogs don't even, respond to that 100%.
So what does that mean for us as human beings? We're going to step into that this evening.
Aquí donde dice que el racionalismo, ¿verdad? Dice que es evidencia supernatural o divina revelación.
Es el opuesto. So with rationalism,
Ajá.
we leave aside the supernatural. The supernatural, God, if you believe in God, has no place in our rational discourse right here. We're going to talk about that sure foundation, unless God is part of that sure foundation. And for Descartes, God will be there. Otherwise, the supernatural, the mystic, your visions, your private revelations, your experiences, your feelings, don't care about them. I really don't care. What the Blessed Virgin Mary told you last night, I don't care. If it's important, Mary will come and tell me. Right? Rationalists. Empiricists would be more interested in your experience. So if Mary appears to you, oh, let's talk about your experiences and what that means for you. Not for rationalists. We need to come up with a solid foundation. And your revelations, your supposed messages from Mary, that's not part of the sure foundation that I'm building my life on. Your Bible, I'm sorry, but I am doubting everything. Even the origin of your Bible, and whether it was written by God. You say it was written by God? I'm doubting that. I'm doubting everything. Follow me? That's part of skepticism here. We will doubt everything. You say that book was written by God. We're going to doubt everything.